I mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal, you know?
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.
Welcome to Nature Talks podcast, the podcast for nature enthusiasts and eco-conscious minds. Join us as we explore the beauty of our natural world, share expert insights, and ignite a passion for conservation. I'm your host, Irfan Firozi, and together let's embark on this enriching journey. Tune in and let Nature Talks awaken the wonder of our planet within you. So today is a very exciting talk. I've always been excited for this because it's been so long we wanted to have a talk on elasmobranchs, sharks and rays in simple terms. And we have got an amazing person with us as our guest, Dr. Andrej. So Dr. Andrej, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about your background in environmental conservation and marine biology?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. Hello from sunny Albania. As you said, my name is Andrej, and I spent most of my career working on the disease development and effects of pollution of disease development in sharks, skates, and rays in northern Mediterranean Sea, Adriatic Sea particularly. I was a principal investigator for National Geographic Discovery Channel, the very famous Explorers Club. I spent time as an ambassador of Barcelona Convention, and I'm the founder and chief scientist of the Shell Club Adria Research Center here in the Eastern Adriatic Sea. For my formal education, for my specializations, I combined veterinary medicine with biological sciences, and I tried to actually mitigate the pollution, and I tried to give sharks a second chance that they really deserve to have.
That's wonderful to hear, and you're doing a lot, Dr. Andrej, and it's wonderful, to be honest. I mean, you're working with National Geography, Discovery Channel you've worked with, so it's amazing. So our listeners are honestly vast. They come from research backgrounds, students, youth, you know, there are tons of different backgrounds in which our listeners come from. So can you provide our listeners with an overview of the elasmobranchs and their significance within the marine ecosystem?
Definitely, yes. Sharks, skates, and rays, the elasmobranchs, they influence the structure and health of marine ecosystems. Like this, certain individual have its own health, also the ecosystem have the health of its own. Also, as many people know, many elasmobranch species are apex predators, which means that they are on the top of the marine chain, food web, and as such predators, they help maintain the balance of marine population by controlling the number of their prey as species, preventing overpopulations, and also indirectly affecting the abundance, distribution of other species in the ecosystem, and as such they are also involved in the nutrient cycling processes. The health of elasmobranch populations can also serve as a, let's say, indicator for overall marine ecosystem health. They are long-lived animals, they occupy high trophic levels usually, and changes in their populations can signal some shifts in the ecosystem balance that is important for us when we do the research and conservation efforts.
That's amazing indeed. I mean, I know that sharks themselves are among the sharks and rays, and the animals in that same group, the elasmobranches, are very, very old prehistoric animals that have little changed since then. So I have looked to your profile, Dr. Andrej, and I know that one of your key research points is on pollution and disease development. So how does pollution, particularly plastic pollution and chemical contaminants, affect elasmobranchs' health and their susceptibility to diseases?
Well, let's say in two different ways. All marine animals, sharks, skates, and rays can accidentally ingest plastic, for example, debris, it can lead to the physical harm, such as injuries, blockages in the digestive system. It potentially can either lead to starvation and death in certain individuals. For example, often on the autopsies of the big blue sharks, we found a lot of long lines that got strangled in the lower parts of ileum, which is actually the lower part of the spiral valve itself. But the far worst is actually the one that we don't see. Plastic, especially micro and nanoplastic, it can act as a sponge for chemical and all the chemical pollution in the water, especially persistent organic pollutants, the POPs and heavy metals, can attract to these microplastics. The smaller the plastic particle it is, the more of these pollutants it can attract. So when elastomer brands ingest the plastics, especially microplastics, they are also ingesting these toxic chemicals that accumulated on the surface of the plastic itself. So during our research within the plastic shark projects that we had 2 years ago, we actually found an average of 1,200 pieces of microplastics, usually polyamides, in the shark intestinal, which is within the 20 centimeters of the shark intestinal here in the waters of Albania, which is extremely high number, and also showing us that some measures that have to be taken in order to mitigate these negative effects. Such accumulations might lead to endocrine disruptions. Some chemicals in the plastics, such as, for example, bisphenol A, BPA, are known to be endocrine disruptors. So these substances can actually interfere with the hormonal systems, affecting growth, potentially reproduction, and also overall health of elasmobranchs as such. So we come to another way that plastics, especially the toxic chemicals influence, which is the immunosuppression, as exposure to certain chemical contaminants in the water might weaken the immune system, and then making the animal more vulnerable to infections and diseases. But also, as I said, affecting significantly reproduction. It can lead to reduction of overall reproductions. It can lead to the reduction of overall reproduction success, and including lower fertility rates. It can also lead to, let's say, some developmental abnormalities in the offspring, which have been noted in the sharks so far. Some of them can be linked also to the pollution and such.
I mean, that's very sad to hear, because I mean, they are cool creatures after all. And
Yes, it's alarming, because of course the vast majority of the threats come from the overfishing, uncontrolled fisheries, non-target fisheries, finning, etc. Of course, the fishery is number one, but something we have to take in mind when we do the conservation is definitely the disease development, the pollution, and the habitat loss.
indeed, that's what exactly. So sharks have been, a victim of our problems and what we throw at them for a very long time. So we're currently talking about, these examples which you mentioned. So what in particular are your own, research findings that illustrate, the connection between the pollution and the disease development in elasmobranches populations?
Well, to be honest, from the published and vast majority of unpublished records from past 4 years that we have that we are disseminating right now, in let's say 60 to 90%, which is an extremely high number of the studied sample, which was a random sample in different population, including the deep sea as such, we have found several diseases that have to be very common, and these are mostly changes in the liver parenchyma. They are in the form of the mixed mononuclear inflammatory aggregates, which was very basically, in the layman terms, could be said like as a hepatitis, inflammation of the liver. It's something that occur in almost most of the benthic species that we have studied. We have also noticed the inflammation of the pancreas as one of the common diseases, especially in gravid females. We don't have any connections yet, but it was observed as such in most of the gravid females. We also noticed the changes in the renal tubules, like the choriopyknosis, the degenerative changes. We also have recorded the cases of meningoencephalitis in sharks that is without clear etiological reasoning yet. What we have discovered also are the changes in the whole reproductive tube, which could be definitely linked with some of the pollutants. But these changes that occur in the liver are something that we try to focus the vast majority of our efforts, because of the biological function of liver as such, and because of the high prevalence of these diseases we observed. And just to mention, all of them that are mentioning now are not parasitary induced, because when they are parasitary induced in the liver, we can differentiate them from the lesions as I described right now.
So I mean, that's devastating. So Dr. Andy, throughout your research and throughout your work, what do you think is the biggest human-caused problem on sharks?
It's definitely fisheries. Despite speaking of pollution today, mostly it's definitely the fisheries. Overfishing, uncontrolled fisheries, destructive fisheries are the number one, definitely. Even here in my region, and a lot of my work is also focused on fisheries, of course, but we try to take a look at things from all angles. So we try to study the fisheries, the climate change, we try to study the habitat destruction and pollution, and their overall effects on elasmobranch species, and we try to develop the species-specific measures for long-term conservation.
I mean, yes, indeed, the overfishing is indeed a very big issue for many of the complex marine ecosystems and marine species, especially because, sharks are hunted for their fin and for different things. So, pollution's impacts on marine life is often, multi-faceted. So, how do these pollutants interact with others, stresses like climate change and habitat degradation? And Dr. Andy, what are the combined effects on the elasmobranch health in general?
Okay, let's say that you mentioned the climate change first. I think let's say that they lead, of course, to rising temperatures in oceans and decrease the oxygen levels, which can directly stress elasmobranchs. Pollution can further weaken the physiological resilience, making them more vulnerable to changing conditions. On the other hand, habitat degradation due to factors like coastal development, habitat destruction, overall pollution can reduce the ability or can reduce the availability of suitable habitats. That can lead to increased competition for limited resources and reduce reproductive stress, for example. Pollution, climate change, habitat destruction can collectively stress elasmobranch beyond their physiological limits. For example, pollution-induced immunosuppression can leave the less equipped to cope with disease that might come with changing in ecosystems that could be caused by the climate change, as you mentioned. So, for example, what we have found in studying the salmon gill sharks, the study that we conducted with MRAs to study how they are affected by the trawler nets and how to enhance the post-release survival rates, because we noticed that vast majority of individuals are being landed in extremely poor condition and without physical and microscopic signs of the trauma. And we studied the MRAs to see what the causes, what is the exact cause of that we couldn't notice any kind of lesions. The spinal cord was intact, the liver and viscera seems fine. Then on biochemical research showed that actually they could die of the stress-induced mortality, which is something that they got when they cope with the fisherman nets. So also the physiological stress with changes in ecosystem, pollution and habitat degradation can also affect them severely. Some species more, some species less, of course.
Dr. Andy, I mean, that's all a call to action by itself. So before we move further with our questions, I wanted to ask you this. We have asked this from our previous guests also. So what was the interest of yours, which you thought I'm interested to research on the elasmobranch in general? Was it like a childhood interest, or how did it start?
It was like a childhood interest. It was something that was I barely all my life. I moved more than 20 times in my life. I grew up in a war-torn country in the post-war Yugoslavia, and I grew up far from the coast, so I had many challenges to overcome to fulfill my career. But thank God, I'm very happy with what I did, and I wouldn't change my path for anything in the world. But it was like a life's dream, and I haven't thought about studying in my undergraduates. I never thought of studying the diseases as such, but after I finished my undergraduates and before getting on higher levels, I started to work with one or two research companies that were dealing particularly with diseases, and I saw some potential that was overlooked, and I saw also the big problem that was overlooked, especially in my region, and I wanted to contribute to the knowledge, and I also believe that such contribution will make some impact for more efficient conservation efforts.
That's amazing indeed. Your journey, Dr. Andy, has been a very inspiring one. But in particular, I know it's a very difficult question, but what is that particular favorite memory of yours which you you really enjoyed? What is that particular favorite memory you had with sharks?
I usually say that my job have like 5 different jobs inside. We work at the fisheries, we do monitoring, we are at the trawlers for a couple of days at the sea with the fishermen, educating them, doing the monitoring. We are in the labs all day long. We are diving all the night, as the one that you can see in my background, the beautiful gulper shark I took a couple of months ago. And for me, I love all the parts, even the writing parts, educational parts, they are all equally important. But what I enjoy the most, we do a lot of surgeries of the gravid females at the vessels, at the fishermen vessels, and especially even in the placental viviparous species, we have some examples where we were able to remove the fetuses out of uteruses in the late stage gravidity, put them in our labs for in vitro incubation. We induce a tube feeding there. We take extra care of them, having somebody of our researchers or interns with them like every 2 hours, and then after 10 or 50 days of observation and feeding, when they come to time for natural delivery, we return them to the sea. Returning the animals to the sea where they belong is definitely something that I enjoy the most. Even the ability to save some of them, we save around, in our lab, we have around 2,500 individuals per month, which is quite a lot. And being able to save some of them, or at least to save, for example, the eggs in oviparous species and to incubate them and release later is something that gave me the most pleasure, because I work a lot with that, and that is almost all my work, because it's working on pathology. But being able to observe live animals as they should be, and being able to help them just little by little is something that makes me the most happy about my work.
It's amazing. I mean, Dr. Andy, I've seen you're having an amazing impact on these creatures' populations. And I know, I mean, I've got a few specimens also of animals. One of them is a shark, actually, which I bought from a fish market. I mean, they're catching them at a very juvenile stage, which is sad. But yeah, working with live animals is indeed an amazing opportunity. So, Dr. Andy, back to our topic. So, I mean, sharks and in general, the elasmobranchies are important in the ecosystem. So let's say some unfortunate event happens, climate change, that almost all the elasmobranchies from betta fish to stingrays to sharks disappear from the planet. How do you think the marine ecosystem will be affected?
It will severely affect the ecosystems. It will cause the severe destruction of trophic cascades. It will cause the ecosystem will have to face many different challenges to overcome the losses of such important species, and it could lead to changes in ecosystem that could make them unrecognizable for us in current state, especially removing the species from higher tropical levels. So removing every single species out of ecosystem makes some issues and some problems, but removing sharks as such could cause to alterations and catastrophic disruption of tropical cascades, of the health of overall health of marine ecosystems. There are many different predictions what could happen if certain species. With sharks, it's phylogenetically different to talk in general, but there were many attempts to actually try to produce what would happen if the shark disappeared, and the results were extremely bad in every single attempt.
I see. I mean, I've heard that they control a few fish populations that, let's say, can damage coral reefs, and then their community.
Let's say like that they maintain the health of marine ecosystems. It's something that is scientifically true, and it's something that sounds very nice to say, and it's the easiest way to actually to describe their importance. They maintain the health of the marine ecosystems.
Indeed, yeah, I do agree very much, because I believe that biodiversity, whether it's sharks or any different creature, they're all connected like a web, in which if one of those strands of the web breaks, we all could enter in a whole difficult and disastrous situation. So what do you think, let's say as individuals, myself for example, I'm still a school student, how do you think that we as normal people can work in conservation strategies, and how can we mitigate these impacts, and how can we save the elasmobranchies, or let's say sharks, most common, because people fear them a lot from the movies we see and the wrong image that people produce of sharks, how do you think that we can protect?
Well, it's something that I emphasize even of one of my speeches in DC on the National Geographic, when I told that what's happening in the ecosystems is everyone's fault. It's even my fault. It's your fault. It's everybody's fault. And this is the right time to take responsibility and to act accordingly. So there are many things that we can do to help conserve not only sharks, skates, and rays, but many highly threatened and vulnerable species in the planet. Even no matter that you don't live on the coast, you are still affecting the sharks as well with your actions, with your trash, with your water consumption, with your meat consumption. Meat consumption is one of the worst things that the humans unfortunately have, and it's something that also affecting all others. It's affecting climate change and it's affecting the other species. So I think that a sustainable way of living starts from each individual, and sometimes the ordinary people think that conservation issues and these issues could be solved by some big companies that are polluting. But also, as you said, like high school, starting from there's a lot of things to do. And if all of us start to change just step by step at a time, then we could make a lot of impact on global scales. And I think it's something that shouldn't be overlooked, and the importance of the individual role. So that's why we need a lot of education, a lot of rising awareness that precisely what we do with the fishermen here. For example, we have around 70 maybe unofficial workshops and events for fishermen just in single port per year. We spend time on the boats with them, we try to educate them, and for example the overall success rates of the post-release survival enhanced by the 60-70% in a couple of years, which is a lot. It's a single port. It's nothing in terms of global scales, but if all the ports and at least some of them could follow the same example, then we would have very good results. So that's something that I mean also for the other people, and education, rising awareness, sustainability is the key for our survival and survival of the animals that are also part of the nature as we are.
It is amazing indeed, and it's actually true. I mean, because if you look at it, we as individuals might think that if we are doing it alone, there's no impact, but each one of us can contribute. And I believe, it does. People think that it's in the hands of governments and companies, but the thing is, at this point, everyone is pointing at someone else. Governments are saying that if you try to change your life, I am with you. People are saying you're not giving up for policies. So they're all pointing fingers at each other, and I hope things go well.
But I think that in this case, it's affecting us, our kids, it's affecting our future, and instead of pointing figures, even in science, unfortunately, it happened a lot. Instead of working together, a lot of scientists, unfortunately, work against each other, etc. Even the science is driven by the ego, by the greed, by money, which is unfortunate, but it's true. And I think we should all, this solving of such problems and mitigating of negative effects is a multi-system, multi-dimensional issue. It's required such approach to be solved. It's the only way how we can do it, with regional, unique, interdisciplinary, cross-border cooperation. That's the only way how we can do it, and also starting from an ordinary man. That's almost everything starts from an ordinary man.
That's amazing indeed, and we spoke about different things that we can do to save the sharks. So, what do you think, Dr. Ali? I mean, could you share a personal experience or a moment in your research that that highlights the urgency of addressing all the impacts on elastobranches, and what future do you envision if all these issues, pollution levels, for example, continue to rise?
I think if you spend one working day with me, then you will see the urgency. If you spend working day with 500 dead sharks per day, then you will see the urgency. If you spend a lot of autopsies with me and you see what we found inside, what kind of diseases we observe, then you will also see the urgency. And that's why I use a lot of medias, because I try to spread it. We also publish scientific papers. I'm just finishing my second book because I have to send it to the press by the end of this week. But I think the even more important in some cases is to let the wider public know about the results as well. And in my career are focused almost equally, and I have these two career paths: the scientific one and the one where I try to disseminate my results with far wider public, because the scientific papers are accessible and understandable for a very limited group of people, and even for the policymakers and decision makers are not. So sometimes it's very important to have like far wider outreach, and I think it's also relevant for older species, not only for sharks, case array, of course.
Again, Dr. Nande, I mean, awareness is key. One of the main important things what we are
Definitely
trying
is.
to achieve in Nature Talks as well is sharing expert opinions, because experts have seen what most people don't see. I mean, we don't see the gruesome impacts of climate change. We don't see the gruesome impacts of our plastic and all these things. But people like you have seen it. I've seen it happen in species that are so important that affect an entire ecosystem, the entire globe at some point.
It's very important to share, to raise awareness, because in this area that we live now, it's minor attention is paid to the nature. We take it for granted. We take it something like it's there and it will be there. And I think such a rising awareness now, when we are in some digital area where we are easily accessible with everything, then it's the best time to actually try to produce more content that will be firstly eye-catchy and interesting, because people need it to pay attention. Then it will educate people and give them an opportunity to actually learn more about what the nature is really facing, and it's something that it's not something that it will change by its own. It's just getting worse even as we speak. For the past half an hour, I don't know, God know how many trucks of plastics end up in the sea while we speak. God know how many sharks get caught by the nets, either by accident or as a target catch. And so it's happening as we live, as we sleep, as we talk, and it's extremely high to mitigate. It's happening in the high amounts as we think how to mitigate it. So it's like we are always a couple of steps behind it. And that therefore it's extremely needed to motivate and to empower the next generation of the planetary stewards that will be here also to support and maybe to give far better ideas that I had and we had in this age.
So as we conclude, this is what we always do for the end of our episode. Dr. Nande, what would be your number one message to our listeners who would be listening to this, and to make a difference in protecting the elasmobranchs and marine ecosystems? And let's say not only that, but saving us from all these issues and getting us connected with the natural world.
The message to take 1 minute in the day-to-day they are listening, just take 1 minute of time and think what is your impact on the environment, your closest environment, animals, nature. Just think what is your impact, and I think everything else you will come to later. So just think about what your impact is, and then think how to mitigate it, and we'll start with yourself, and then think how urgent it is, and then afterwards you of course communicate with each other, and especially for people who want to pursue careers in this field, we really need it.
Indeed, we do. I mean, I myself want to take career in biological science, and so I mean it is very important. Thank you so much for your message, and thank you so much for giving us your time, Dr. Andre, and I hope you all the best. I hope to collaborate with you again in the future, and hopefully we can save all the species on Earth and save ourselves as well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm here for everything you do, my need.
I mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal,
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.